Welcome back, everyone, as we play some more New Campaign Trail. You guys seem to really like it when we do this. It's a way to look at history by playing a game that involves us taking on the role of one of the presidential candidates from a past election. I'll put down in the comment section, I'll pin the playlist of all of my previous playthroughs on New Campaign Trail. Some of these are fun, some of these are educational, most of them are both. And I had someone suggest to me that I take on the 1916 election, but I don't know if this is what they intended, because what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take on the role of Thomas Woodrow Wilson as he runs for re-election in 1916. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Wilson honestly. In other words, I'm not going to say what people want to hear. I'm not going to give them the political campaign answer. I'm going to give them the real Woodrow Wilson thought process answer. So, for example, in 1916, his big campaign slogan is "He kept us out of war," which, the United States is heavily against being involved in the war in Europe and in Africa and in other places, what we know today as the First World War. But Woodrow Wilson, several weeks after being sworn in for his second term, gets the United States into the war. We declare war. Obviously, it was Congress that does that. It's not just Woodrow Wilson. But we're going to campaign with Woodrow Wilson as a pro-war candidate. My goal in the end is to see if we can't tank this thing and allow Charles Evans Hughes to win the election. So we'll see how it goes. 1916, we will keep Thomas Marshall. The alternative is to take Cleveland's own Newton Baker. I've visited his grave. He's actually buried in the same cemetery, Lakeview Cemetery, that President Garfield is buried in, as well as John D. Rockefeller and a whole lot of other famous people. But no, we're going to keep Thomas Marshall as our running mate. And can we tank this election? That is the question. What themes will you emphasize as you accept the Democratic nomination and begin your campaign? Let's see. So under my first term, we accomplished more progressive reform than under decades of Republican rule, despite any promises of that the party making up until now. My speech will focus on our success in avoiding... No, we're not going to do that, because we're going to not avoid the war in Europe. Let's see. I'm going to take my attack to the Republican Party. There's nothing wrong with attacking the Republicans, but you also have a legitimate positive record of accomplishment you could focus on. Is it really positive, though? Is it? As 1916 begins, you have a vacancy to fill on the Supreme Court. Advisors are recommending Louis Brandeis, a choice that is sure to be controversial. Why? Because he's Jewish. No, Woodrow Wilson's not going to put no Jewish person on the court. No way. He is too radical to be considered for a court opening. I'd also rather not have the Jewish issue come up during this campaign. Vote for the crook. It's important. Okay, so let's take a look at the current electoral vote estimate. Looks like Charles Evans Hughes would eke out a very narrow victory if things were to go the way that they are for the time being. We're going to campaign somewhere we're already winning, so we're going to go to South Carolina. Yeah, we'll visit South Carolina, where we're basically running unopposed, and therefore it won't help us even a little bit. The Democratic convention erupted into spontaneous cries of "He kept us out of war" as you were nominated. Do you plan to campaign on this position, or will you add some nuance to it? Forget nuance. I pray for peace, but we will not compromise the rights of American shipping and commerce. We are fully prepared to take the fight to Germany if interference continues. Yep, we're going to do that. You sound as bellicose as Teddy Roosevelt on this issue, to the great disappointment of many in your party. Aw, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope it really hurts me. Oh, look, it's hurting me in Ohio. That's just too bad. So sad. Hughes has got 301 electoral votes now. Okay, back to the game. As September approaches, the nation is at serious risk of a national rail strike. Ooh, what are your plans for dealing with this? Well, to be honest, I'm just going to nationalize the rail industry. Let's see if that's what actually is a choice here. Direct intervention. Yep, we're going to just do direct intervention. Yeah. Your efforts are appreciated by the unions, but others see them as one-sided. Yep, that's exactly what they are. Oh, look, now Hughes is up to 360. So far, so good. Let's campaign in Florida. All right, yeah, let's go there. How much do you plan to highlight the creation of the Federal Trade Commission as an accomplishment during this campaign? I don't know what the right Woodrow Wilson answer would be here, so we're just going to go with what I think is the most like Wilson. I hope to hit the theme of reform and I will speak about the FTC at every opportunity and waste no effort implying its work has only just begun at the present point. I have not yet begun to regulate. That's right. This is just what most Democrats want to hear. Well, darn it. I actually helped the Democrats. But looks like Hughes is winning in Ohio now, so I like to see that. It's 360 to 171 still. Do you have a position to take on the calls for the prohibition of alcohol as you campaign this fall? Yeah, we're just going to kind of waffle in the middle on that issue. Let's campaign in Georgia. That's where I grew up, Woodrow Wilson. Do you support the level of preparedness established by the recent National Defense Act? So we're going to get involved in things like the military draft and building up the Army for war. What we've done so far is a good start, but we're still far from prepared to meet the type of emergency which might arise. Yep. Let's do that. The stance definitely goes too far for many of your supporters. Sorry. Do you support the Clayton Antitrust Act, which was recently passed? Do you believe that unions should be exempted from antitrust regulations? I think the Woodrow Wilson answer here would probably be yes. He's not going to say anything about federal overreach. He doesn't know what federal overreach is. He has not yet begun to overreach. Yep. I support it. Let's go to Texas. Yeah, we'll go to visit Texas this time. How much do you plan to push back against Southern obstructionism on the federal child labor law? I want campaign this fall on the passage of a child labor law. Yeah, I think he probably would in that case. The Keating-Owen Act has passed and provides federal protections against the use of child labor. So where are we at now? We are still at 360, 171. I think that's about as good as it's going to get for Charles Evans Hughes, who, by the way, was on the Supreme Court. So one of those very few times you have a Supreme Court justice running for president. Kind of cool. I should mention, too, that Hughes, he ends up resigning from the Supreme Court when he runs for president, and then he's going to be Secretary of State under Harding. And then he's going to come back to the Supreme Court as Chief Justice, appointed by Herbert Hoover to replace William Howard Taft. We might be able to swing Tennessee over to Hughes if we try really hard. We'll see what happens here. Will you sign the Revenue Act of 1916? So they pass a constitutional amendment that allows for a permanent income tax, which is going to happen under Woodrow Wilson. I am proud to sign this act into law. I think the broad majority of Americans can stand behind its provisions. Yeah, let's do that. The Democratic Party is pretty well united in support of this law. Yeah, the Democratic Party tends to, and you can see that actually helped us in the South. They tend to be anti-tariff, and so the federal income tax is an alternative for raising money for the federal government, which up to this point in history, its primary means of revenue has been tariffs. So, yeah, people in the South are going to like that. That's going to help a little bit, but it's still 360. Let's go to Louisiana. Yep. Theodore Roosevelt is hitting the campaign trail hard this fall. However, he continues to make bellicose speeches about the war in Europe. Will you attack Roosevelt and Hughes for this? Roosevelt is still a popular figure, particularly among the type of progressive voter we hope to attract. So I will not criticize him. Plus, I agree with him on the war at this point. Seems like you're leaving something on the table. Well, too bad. What will your position be on the women's suffrage question as you campaign this fall? So kind of, I don't know exactly how Charles Evans Hughes felt about this, but I know that guys like Theodore Roosevelt were in favor of women's suffrage. It was a pretty fairly universal issue on both sides at this point. I stand opposed to the expansion of women's suffrage. I think he probably deep in his heart felt that way, given some of the other things that he said concerning women throughout his life. But yeah, so we just did that totally just to screw Woodrow Wilson. And it looks like Ohio is going pretty firmly now. It's 375 to 156. Let's go to Alabama. Yep. You have opposed the federal farm credit system in the past, but a Farm Loan Act is being pushed through Congress again this year. Will you support it this time? I'm gonna stay consistent with what Woodrow Wilson would say here, because he's opposed it in the past. Do you have any statements to make about the Federal Reserve Act, which established the Federal Reserve, which obviously Woodrow Wilson supported? I want to double down. Let's see. It's a tremendous step forward. Yeah. This is a popular stance for Democrats and progressives. Okay. Things have really solidified between North and South at this point, though. My goodness. Yeah, 395 to 136 now. If only. If only. Let's go to South Carolina. Do you plan to attack Charles Evans Hughes' stance on the preparedness in war with Europe, and if so, how? I don't plan to address it one way or the other. Forces of Pancho Villa have killed over 30 Americans in separate incidents and even launched a raid into New Mexico. How will we respond to this? So how he did respond is you have the Mexican Punitive Expedition, which is the sending of the military down to the border, and we station a ton of troops on the southern border, but then also send under John Pershing this Mexican punitive expedition into Mexico. Woodrow Wilson, despite all of his campaigning about keeping out of the war in Europe, has used the military multiple times at this point. In fact, I'll put in the description some videos that you can watch about Woodrow Wilson that I've done in the past that address some of this stuff a little bit more. So, yeah, we're going to dispatch a military expedition to Mexico. Yep, we'll go with the first one. The Pershing expedition makes its way into Mexico as the campaign at home progresses. Okay, things are pretty stable still, about the same as they were before. Let's go to, where haven't we been yet? Mississippi. Yeah, let's go there. Do you have any statements to make about the Federal Trade Commission established in 1914? I support the Federal Trade Commission and will take a broad interpretation of its power over the next 4 years. Absolutely. Do you believe that certain groups in the United States, for their own narrow interests, are trying to undermine American diplomacy and the global order? Certain groups, huh? I do, and I would especially single out Irish Americans in this regard. I am concerned about any citizen who would embrace the presence of a hyphen in their American identity. Yeah, that's the one. This is a broadly popular stance. Well, darn it, I didn't want to do popular bigotry, but hey, whatever. It's 389 to 142 now. We haven't been Arkansas yet. Would you support American participation in a post-war League of Nations? Well, duh, he wants there to be one. Yep, let's do that. Do you support the recently ratified 17th Amendment requiring the direct election of U.S. senators? Boo! But Woodrow Wilson might not necessarily feel that way. I actually don't know what his feeling was on the 17th Amendment, but I think he probably was in favor of it. He's not going to say in line with the original Constitution. No, he's a progressive. Yeah, we'll do this one. The 17th Amendment is broadly popular amongst voters, and it is best to support it. Yeah. Tennessee could go either way at this point. We're going to go to, I think we've been pretty much everywhere at this point. Let's go to Virginia, our birth state. Do you support the temporary curtailment of American shipping in the Atlantic in order to reduce the chance of German submarine attacks? So the Germans are doing unrestricted submarine warfare. They've published stories in the newspaper, advertisements in newspaper in places like New York, warning Americans not to get on ships that are heading to places like the UK, flying British flags, especially ships like the Lusitania and the Housatonic, which are going to end up being sunk by the Germans. We have certain rights as a neutral power, and to retreat from those rights would only serve to invite further aggression. This position is lifted straight from the Republican platform. Perfect. Are you willing to meet with German American and Irish American political leaders to discuss your beliefs, regardless of your feelings toward their organizations? I refuse to meet with any hyphenated American group which places another identity above that of American. So there's a very famous incident that happens, not related to this specifically, but where Wilson meets with a group of African American leaders, and he tells the leader of this group at the end, he said, if your group is ever going to come to my presence in the White House again, they'd better send someone else, because I will not meet with you again. He thought this guy was uppity and demanding and did not show the proper level of respect due to the racist white American president of the United States. I refuse. Yeah, we'll go with that. This is a strong patriotic position and helps mute some jingoistic criticisms of the Democrats' anti-war stance. All right. Let's go back to Georgia. Would you support a law requiring new immigrants to pass a literacy test in English? Well, as our only president with a PhD, I feel like that he would certainly say that. Yeah. Democratic Party still wins a lot of its support from immigrants, leaving aside the current environment of full-on Americanism. Do you plan to support the Jones Act, granting greater autonomy to the Philippines? He did actually, fairly certain he did support this. But it's premature, we'll say. There's still a large anti-war, anti-imperialist group within the Democratic Party, and they view this stance as a betrayal. Oh, too bad, so sad. Back to Alabama. Last question. Where will you travel during your final days? Oh, we definitely need to go. Let's go to the West Coast. Why not? It'll be a fun vacation. Most people think it's going to be awfully close, they said. I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be all that close. We won South Carolina. We won Virginia. Didn't win Vermont. Oh well. Won Georgia. Didn't win Maine. Oh, here come a bunch of states. Yeah, it's solidly North versus South. We are on the verge of a civil war again at this point. Oh, yeah, look at that solid red versus blue. My goodness. We didn't even get to half the states, and I already lost the election. That's fantastic. Let's look at the map. Oh, yeah, we did lose Tennessee. Beautiful. 407 for Charles Evans Hughes. That is a beautiful thing. What was the popular vote? 52.6% to 41.4%. Let's look at what the actual results were in real history. Can we do that? Here we go. In reality, it was 277, 254. People forget how close that election was. It really, really did come down to just a handful of places. In fact, let's take a look at the actual map, because darn it, if Ohio didn't determine the election and give it to Woodrow Wilson that year, it could have, really, it didn't even have to be Ohio. It could have just as easily been any of these other states. Nebraska could have swung. What was the total? It was eight electoral votes would have done it, right? That would have given, that would have made it 269 to 262. So you would have needed something else besides that. But, Nebraska and, say, Colorado would have been enough to swing the election for Hughes and Fairbanks. Goodness, it really was so close. But there you have it. Let me know your thoughts. Is there another one of these elections you'd like me to check out? I'll pin down in the comment section the playlist so you can check out all of my playthroughs on this game. I'll put down in the description some links to some videos I've done about Woodrow Wilson and his presidency. I'll also throw one up on the screen here at the end. Thanks for watching.